A very good morning to all. I would first of all like to thank all of you for being here. You all had a choice to enjoy the Goa, but you all have made time for us to interact and discuss today. So after the special panel members have talked about employee motivation and engagement, I will try and spend some time in a relatively new concept called entrepreneurship. Let me first introduce the organization where some of these concepts have been implied. I work for an organization which is in the broking and financial services space. It has about 5,500 employees. And being in the service industry, just to give you an idea, about 80% of our cost of the company is in the people cost. And only 20% is what we call as the non-HR cost. So the people services are the most important services that we have. So on an ongoing basis, we need to come up with concepts and initiatives which are able to be better people practices or next practices. And one of the concepts that I will talk to you today will be on entrepreneurship. As you can read through the biography, originally I was supposed to talk about emotional intelligence and entrepreneurship. But that's a slightly larger subject. So I've eliminated emotional intelligence and will talk about entrepreneurship. And if you have any questions, maybe during the tea break, we will be able to discuss that further. So, entrepreneurship, the word really comes from entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is really about starting a business. You have an idea or you have a concept, you start a small business. And as Dr. Chatterjee was talking about yesterday, out of some 8.5 lakh organizations in India, 7 odd lakh are family businesses. And typically all these businesses have started as initial entrepreneurs. You start an entrepreneurship, if the idea is successful, if the product is successful, you move and create an organization. And as an organization becomes large, most organizations tend to lose their speed. One of the reasons is that you tend to lose your aggression, the risk-taking ability, or what is also typically called as your entrepreneurial spirit. That is the typical tendencies and stagnation hits. But typically, and let me take an example of successful HR professionals. What most successful HR professionals, when they retire or when they're at the peak of their careers, try and want to do? Don't they want to set up their own organizations in the training areas, in the HR areas, that is recruitment, selection, consulting? Have you seen that as a commonality? How many of you guys have seen that? Can you raise your hands? Yeah? Especially in the private sector, we tend to see it a lot, isn't it? Why is that? We all have that spirit of entrepreneurism. And we see that typically people who are entrepreneurs are more successful. There are typical tendencies of an entrepreneur. Limited resources, such as money, people, machinery, patents, ideas, so on and so forth. The high risk-taking ability in the Indian context is not very much encouraged, right? Returns are related to risk. How big an investment, capital expenditure can I make? We may typically have our families to take care of, so we also decide to take such initiatives after we have reached a certain level per se. And one of the most key critical differentiators of entrepreneurs is the self-motivated aspect. I also call it achievement orientation. Not all of us typically tend to have very high achievement orientation and aspiration, but entrepreneurs typically do. The picture, as you can see on your screens, really talks about you'll be able to differentiate between the chalk and cheese by just having them toss without telling them what the objective is, and you will find out the most achievement-oriented people may not necessarily get any of those ring tosses on the 5th one, which is the furthest away. But they will still attempt. They may not have the skill, but they will still attempt to throw the ring on the further away ones. Wherein the people who may not necessarily want to take the risks or may do not have the achievement orientation of an entrepreneur will typically try and make it the first one or the second one. That's one of the best ways to differentiate between the high potential people who have the competency of achievement orientation. One of the first things that is needed. Obviously, technical skills and other abilities are there. But this would be one of the easiest way to identify. Once you have identified these people, you need to provide them with resources, that is manpower, additional resources. You also need to provide them flexibility. Why flexibility? A real entrepreneur does not want to be straitjacketed and put in a box. They want to do what they want to do. As a byproduct and as an eventual return, the organization will achieve its goal, and this incumbent will also achieve their goals. And nurture these people. Give them face time. Give them the skills and the talent that is required. So this is from a perspective of identifying these entrepreneurs. You can also create a structure. And the structure can be with respect to what is typically known as profit sharing. But more than profit sharing, the most important aspect is, what is your model of profit sharing? As I stated earlier, one of the important attributes that the entrepreneurs do not like is the so-called performance management systems, because it averages it out, right? As HR professionals, our job is to create a normal curve. And no normal return is what an entrepreneur wants. They want extra normal returns. So one of the ways that we have looked at inculcating the entrepreneurship is by eliminating the so-called performance management system in a structured manner for a lot of people. When I say lot, let's say a group of people. And in such a case, I would like to give an example of a function within the HR. The function is the training and development team. Now, typically, when you attend a training function per se, there may be certain aspects that stick with you, you learn, but most of us, including the manuals that we receive, we never even go through it. And at the end of it, we may fill a happy form, and the trainer is also happy with the program, but at the end of it, there is no connect. There is nothing that really occurs. So in our organization, we provide training for two aspects. And the two aspects are to increase productivity, and the other is to build the pipeline on leadership. Pipeline on leadership, I'll keep it aside. With respect to productivity training, we call our trainers as productivity jockeys. Now,